Welcome to the show about all things making music, from the creative process and workflow to gear and recording techniques. I'm your host, Brian Funk, musician, producer, Ableton certified trainer, and author of the 5-Minute Music Producer. Let's learn to become better music makers. Welcome to the Music Production Podcast. Today's guest on the Music Production Podcast is veteran music journalist David Rowell. David has worked as an editor and writer at the Washington Post for over 20 years. Stewart Copeland of The Police said David Rowell is the kind of critic who scares us musicians. He really gets it, maybe even more than we do. David is here to talk about his new book, The Endless Refrain, Memory, Nostalgia, and the Threat to New Music. In it, he explores the popularity of legacy acts and tribute acts and the challenges it creates for new musicians trying to get their music heard. David raises the question, do we even want new music? We discuss his take on the trajectory of the music industry and what it means for artists like many of us who create original music and our culture in general. Please welcome David Rowell to the Music Production Podcast. February 21st through 23rd, 2025, I'm taking over Ableton's Pasadena headquarters to host a very special in-person music-making workshop, and you're invited. It's the Finish February Workshop Retreat, and it's open to just 15 people. We're going to spend 3 days bringing your songs from ideas to completion. I'm going to help you finish your music using the techniques and strategies I've learned in my 3 decades of music making and the skills I've discovered speaking with music professionals on nearly 400 episodes of the Music Production Podcast. You'll participate in lessons, activities, and exercises I've developed over my nearly 20 years of teaching experience and 11 years as an Ableton certified trainer teaching music production for Berklee Online. You're going to get personalized one-on-one feedback and constructive advice from me and the other workshop attendees, and we'll meet and learn in small group and individual settings to ensure you get specific feedback and help with your music throughout the entire process. You're going to have the time and support to work on your music so you can leave with finished tracks. Plus, you'll be hanging out at the Ableton Pasadena, California headquarters and have access to Ableton's Push 3 and Move to make music with. And you can take advantage of Ableton's exclusive in-person 20% off hardware and software offers and up to 30% off Push 3 when you trade in your old Push. I'm also going to give you a physical copy of my book, The 5-Minute Music Producer, and a collection of my premium Ableton Live packs. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm very excited, and we're going to get a lot of work done. Space is extremely limited to ensure high-quality, personalized attention. Learn more and sign up at brianfunk.com/workshop, and I'll see you in February. And David, thanks for taking the time to be here.
Hey, Brian, great to be with you.
It's really good to have you. You're right. Your book is really hitting on some important topics, I think, with music, The Endless Refrain. I'm on the third part now, so I still have a little bit to go, but I've gotten through a lot of it, and a lot of it has really struck me a lot as a musician that tries to write his own music and then struggles to get it out there, posts it online to crickets, and then posts a picture of my dog chasing her tail, and it gets all kinds of interaction.
Sure. I mean, there's an endless sea of new music out there, and it can be so overwhelming that some people just don't even try to find it.
Yeah. Yeah, it is kind of like the beauty and the curse
Yes.
of what we have now without as many gatekeepers as we used to have.
Right.
You can reach anybody at any time, but so can everyone else.
Right. Where to even begin in finding,
Yeah.
if you say one day, I'd like to just discover a new musician today, you can do that. But, how you would begin that it can make that idea go away pretty quickly, I think.
Mm. Yeah, and it's like an overwhelming choice. It used to be if I was going to take a chance on a new artist, I bought the CD, took it home, and now I'm invested. I've spent money. And some of my favorite records grew on me. The first listen didn't strike me, but it was the need to get my $15 worth.
It's absolutely it. So that's why I don't stream music, because there's inherently something in that in which I'm not as invested because I haven't paid anything for it. And it's also easy to multitask when you are streaming music, and I really try not to do that either, because multitasking is some interrupted listening, some distracted listening. So I'm with you. If I buy music, I've bought the CD. I really like to listen to it in the car many times first before I even start to ask myself, what do I think of this? You know? I mean, that in some ways,
Mm.
that's just going back to the time when I was a teenager when on a Friday night or Saturday night, we were just so content to drive around for hours with no destination in mind, just listening to the music. We would talk, but there were long stretches when we wouldn't talk, and we were just truly listening, you know?
Yeah.
And part
I
of
have a
that
lot of those
time was,
memories.
if you went out and you bought an album, you might not buy another album for 3 months or more,
Mhm.
or maybe not until maybe you would get another album at Christmas. So you had this one album and, you would put it on, and I was very into the liner notes, "Oh, Leland Sklar played bass on this one track." 'Cause over time, that information kinda sits with you and you make some other connections. "Oh, I know his work from this album or this album," but to just sit there, it was really an art of listening to just sit there and absorb the music, try and hear everything, and then you finished it, and now you were ready to listen to it again, you know? I mean,
Mm.
that's how my generation grew up listening to music. We just sat in a room and we just listened. It's different now.
Ye So many nice memories as a kid when my friends first got cars and you would ride around with them. Freedom, first of all, and
Right.
you've got whatever you're listening to as that soundtrack became really important and just kinda gets printed into you
Yes.
on a very deep level.
Right. I mean, and so I get it, that repetition in the book, but I mostly talk about repetition in terms of MTV and the ways
Mhm.
that just, we were listening to the same music wherever we went, whether we were at home or whether we were out and we had the radio on, it was playing the same songs, now there had always been top 40 radio and all of that, but MTV brings in that new level of repetition where there was not a time basically where you weren't listening to those same songs, because it was so different and mesmerizing. A lot of it was weird and confusing, but it was interesting. But in the beginning, MTV didn't have a lot of music videos. There were a lot of artists who weren't really sold on doing that. It was this sense of I have to show up on a film lot and do what? These were artists who had just made the records in the studios and then went on tour, and here was this whole new thing. And so in the beginning, there's some of those songs were just played over and over, and even if we didn't like those songs, it kind of didn't matter because we were just trying to take in this whole new art form, you know. But then all these generations later, all these decades later, we find that we listen to those songs so much that we just have almost like a Pavlovian response to them. You'll be in Target and you hear Men at Work, and for some people, it's just like this kind of comfort food. It just takes you back
Mm.
to that time where you remember when Men at Work was a big deal and people were playing Men at Work. Or you can be someone who is at Target and you hear Men at Work, a little bit like me, and just think, it's 2024. Why am I still hearing Men at Work at Target? You know?
Yeah. Yeah, we have a funny that's what you say about the musicians with the music videos. I don't know if I ever really thought of it on that level because I think today now a lot of musicians say, "Oh, I have to be on social media. I have to do this. I wanna just do the music and have it speak to me." Little did they know, I guess, in the early '80s when MTV was hitting that that was just the beginning. It was just the start.
Well, it just turned out that there were a lot of artists who were naturals at that,
Yeah.
and that became as important as their music, or so it seemed to me, or it's like the Eurythmics or Duran Duran or Madonna. I mean, they just you can look at those videos now and think, "Well, that's dumb," or "That's goofy. Why are they on a sailboat?" or something. But it was all new, and they were just incredibly, these 4-minute videos. I mean, there was a lot to take in, and they just seemed they were like natural performers, you know? Um, but it just meant that because because the record labels were still a very big deal back then, that there was such a rush to get a hit single out and get a video, back on the airwaves, that there was not always a great emphasis on the music. And sometimes they
Mm.
signed bands because they had crazy looking hair. They just, they wore, hey, this singer wears a muumuu. It was so about the visuals. And so they signed these bands, but it turned out those bands weren't meant to last because they weren't great songwriters, or something happened, or they were paired with the wrong producer. But a lot of those bands in the height of the MTV era didn't necessarily last because they came to our attention for lots of reasons, but being great songwriters was not always their hallmark.
Yeah, the look for music video became a big reason why they stuck around and why we heard them over and over again. They look good on TV.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for me,
Mm.
that so much of that technology was new too. Drum machines and drum programming and MIDI and the synthesizers were still evolving, and that was just what we knew at the time. But when I hear a lot of that 80s music now, and I hear it wherever I go, I'm very aware of, for me, how antiquated those sounds are. I don't think that they've aged very well.
Mhm.
But you know what? Everything I've written in this book and everything I think about music is just entirely subjective. So there are people who love that kind of splat sounding snare, you know?
Yeah,
Um, or all those vocals that had a ton of reverb on them.
right. I think for me, some of my interest in synthesizers and getting into that was a lot of nostalgia from hearing it when I was younger, growing
Oh,
up in the
really?
'80s, and sometimes in an ironic way. Like this cheesy sound from, some song from, some new wave band
Yeah.
was like kind of a funny thing to stick in my music.
Huh.
And I think I've sort of forgotten in a way that it was on some level a little bit of an ironic enjoyment to have these kind of like driving drum machines and at certain times or clearly synthetic sounds
Right. Right.
that it's might say electric guitar sound on the preset,
Yes.
but
Right. Right.
it's nothing like it. But that's kind of fun in a way. And now it's just like part of it. We've seen so much resurgence in the new music that we actually do get to hear with a lot of these dated sounds.
Yeah. Yeah. The bass synthesizer.
Hmm. You have, I mean, I think it might be the first line in the book or one of the first lines in the book, like a central question you're raising is, do we even want new music?
Right.
Do we need it? Do we have enough that already kind of tickles our emotional Pavlovian responses, like you said? Or do we really crave it? Or because it is hard sometimes. I know for myself, as somebody that I think tries to find new music actively and
Sure.
wants to like new stuff,
Right.
if I'm like driving to work, a lot of times I get like kind of tired of sifting through the stuff I don't know, and I just want something I can sing along to.
Well, I try to be so careful to not be a hypocrite in the book because I understand that impulse. I love the old music, and there's so much old music that I play all the time. For me, though, so music discoveries have been some of the greatest moments of my life, and so it would be weird if at 57 I just said, I really don't need to make any more again. That I have listened
Mhm.
to all the music. This is all the music that I want to listen to now. Now, I have so much music that could fill out the rest of my life, but a new discovery where you like a song, you like a band or an artist, and you get that album and it turns out to be really special for you, that's a hard thing to beat, all this time
Mm.
later. I mean, that's just thrilling to me, and so I know that there are lots of people who say, "Hey, I just listen to what I wanna listen to, what's wrong with that?" And part of I mean, on the one hand, my answer is, "Well, nothing." but there are implications to that. And those implications are that, for example, if you love an artist and that artist has put out a bunch of albums, and now the artist put out some new albums in recent years, and you don't really want that new music and you don't really buy that new music, then the artist understands to not really try and play that new music in concert. And I just see so many bands who've been around a long time. They might have a new album out and they play one new song, and then everything else is what they've been playing for decades. Some people want that. But if we continue in this place where we're not wanting new music, then artists will give up recording new music. This is what I think, at least, and they'll just spend the rest of their career playing the hits on tour year after year, and maybe they'll mix up the sequence or something, or maybe they'll do an acoustic arrangement of this song. But basically, if the message is only these songs, then I mean, ultimately they have to make a living, And so if they feel like being defiant and only playing their new music, they can do that because they're artists. But then word gets out on the internet, right? And then suddenly people aren't buying the tickets. So this is what I mean. It just has all kinds of implications. If you don't have to like the new music, but if we get to this point, and I feel like in many ways we have, if we get to the point where we're not even open to the new music, then that's what worries me. And so I kind of think of the book as an alarm bell of sorts, because I'm exploring this question of, do we want new music anymore? In many ways, it worries me that I think that we don't. And so the book is showing some ways that I think that's true. The rise of tribute bands, for example, because there's no more surefire way to avoid a new song than go see a tribute act, you know. And it's the same with music holograms too. The music holograms, which is a newer phenomenon, and some people may not be familiar with that, but it's digitally recreating, at this point, dead artists, with the exception of ABBA. They're very much alive, but they don't want to tour, and they mostly don't want to be seen. And so it's using technology to bring these performers on stage again, but it's always going to be their old songs, the music we already know, And so how big of a development that becomes in music in the concert industry remains a little bit to be seen. But that ABBA show was hugely successful. And what does Kiss do? But at the end of their last show at Madison Square Garden, before they've even left the stage, this big video comes on the screen and it says, "Here's the next chapter of Kiss," and it's a bunch of Kiss avatars flying around and with superpowers. And you watch this video for 2 minutes and you understand, well, Kiss is not going anywhere, and so you can just go see them in concert with these avatars. And so you can think, hey, that's great. Or you can think, well, that's just one more way to keep us stuck listening to the same old music. How about we find the next Kiss, the next group that's trying to make vital music in some way?
Yeah, it's made it to where I think a lot of the bands that are playing their stuff over the years and decades, you start to hear them with more backing tracks. So it's a more safe performance, because we want it safe in terms of the content that we're hearing, because we want to hear it, and we want to hear it the way we heard it on the record.
Right. But vocally, sometimes they're not able to replicate that. And so, like, speaking of Kiss, I mean, that's what Paul Stanley, there were criticisms that Paul Stanley couldn't sing like that anymore. So there were backing tracks,
Yeah, and I get that. I mean, what do you expect, right?
Right.
But it's also, I find that a little uncomfortable when I'm watching a band and I can't tell what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing. I hear like a guitar that's not there, or I hear, it doesn't seem like those background vocals are coming from anywhere.
Right.
It's, I think, that's just being musician, paying attention to this stuff. I would be looking at their guitar pedals if I was close enough and all of that. But yeah, it kind of takes some of the performance aspect of the danger of it. That's always kind of the fun of a live performance, is there's a a little bit of the unknown. Tonight's gonna be a one-off thing that's not gonna
Yeah.
ever happen anywhere else ever again, but
Just when you see,
most
like a moment where a drummer hits the cymbal at the wrong moment, and I just can remember times where the guitarist has looked back and the drummer now howls in delight because he's saying, "Yeah, yeah, I got that wrong." And it's thrilling, and there's no reason for
there's an
that to stay
interaction.
with me, but I remember it.
Yeah.
So, like, I was saying yes, and, Bill Bruford, who's the master drummer, at least he hit a cymbal in a place where Trevor Rabin was not expecting it, and he looked back and, it's just like, "That's right, it's so live," and, um and that's the thrill of live music, and so when you see a hologram performance, I mean, my perspective, it's all very controlled, or,
Mhm.
I mean, you sometimes have live musicians in the hologram shows, but there there's not gonna be a change in the vocals because those vocals are, of course, pre-recorded. So,
Right.
with the hologram shows, I mean, it's the same kind of thing, and for some people, they're up for it, it's not like they are being fooled, it's not like they sit down, the lights go out, and now here's Ronnie James Dio hologram, and someone says, "Wait a minute, why does he look so shiny?" We know he's dead,
Right.
and so no one's really been fooled if they've gotten to that point. So it's just a question of um, for some people, it's not even an ethical question. It's like, well, he's dead, so this is another way we can experience his music. And for some people, it is an ethical question. It just depends on what you want from music,
Mm.
and how you think about music.
I see a little bit of a parallel maybe to, like, professional wrestling, where fighters, people that are into the combat sports
Right.
can't understand it, but that's not why we're here. We understand, we're not being fooled. We're here for the drama and the story of it, and it's obviously predetermined, and we get that. There's other things to appreciate that are still obviously impressive, but
Sure. And can be entertaining.
it's it's a different we're looking at different things here. If you're going to watch a combat sport, you're gonna be disappointed. It's not what you're getting.
Right. I mean, I think it goes back to what was your what was your relationship to music when you were young? Did you get to the point
Mhm.
where you no longer really care about those kinds of things, or were you just so hardcore? And hardcore is not right, or there's no right or wrong here, but were you just so
Right.
hardcore about music and everything that went into it that the idea of a hologram show is just too troubling? I mean, for some people,
Mm.
there's nothing wrong with just wanting to have an entertaining night, you know? But
Mhm.
it raises those questions for people. I think the people I talked to who went to see hologram shows, they had to think about it. I'm not saying
Yeah.
they had to wrestle with it, but they had to think, "Huh, what would that be like? What would I think about that?" Some people said, "You know what? That sounds cool."
Yeah.
And other people stayed away.
Mhm. Yep, I've had this experience with tribute bands where I've had a great time enjoying this, like, kind of celebration of an artist or certain music, but I also have other feelings too, and especially on, like, the local level. So being here, I've been lived my whole life on Long Island and
Mhm.
played in bands, played venues, original music, all that kind of stuff. Seen the actual music scene change over the years, and
Yeah,
so many of the venues that pop up now are basically all tribute band venues. And there's really no way to get in. No one wants to hear the original music. They
that's
want to
right. There
go
is
and
no
hear the
way to miss
songs.
that message, and so it makes if you can't play in your local bar, play original music, and increasingly that's the case, then it's a difficult message to try and reconcile. If you can't play in those places, then where how are as you and I were talking earlier, then how are you supposed to get your music out? And it just speaks to how much people want the music they know. And so, as I spent time with this one tribute band, um, I mean, I came to appreciate lots of things about it. I mean, there some of these bands take it so seriously, and they play the music expertly,
Mm.
and or they put the wigs on so they replicate the kind of the feeling of a particular band, and their stage batter can try and replicate the feeling of that band, and, there are so many of them, though. So it's like new music in that there's so many. Who are the best ones? Because 'Cause they're the ones that will cut through. There's so many, like in Florida, there were so many Journey tribute bands, and so the question, for them is like, "Well, how do we distinguish ourselves from all the others?" And that's what they're all working through. But I mean, it's amazing that you can type in Roy Orbison tribute in Google, and before you finish, it says Roy Orbison tribute act near me, as if you're
Yeah.
looking for like an oil change place. I mean, they're
Right,
everywhere,
McDonald's or yeah.
you know. And some
Mm,
people love that, but
mm,
but we've gotten to that point not accidentally, and we've gotten to that point because the level. I mean, it's what I'm arguing in the book. The grip of nostalgia is unrelenting right now, and that shows up in all kinds of places. It shows up, in commercials. Here's, the Scorpions, "Rock Me Like a Hurricane," and it's promoting a fiber product.
yeah,
Or it's Boston's "More Than a Feeling," and it's promoting Yoplait. Or
right.
TurboTax has Spandau Ballet. And so, on one hand, you think, "Well, why is that? Why would" It's just tapping into the people who grew up on that music. It's just that simple. And so part of what's connected to that is, so, all these musicians are selling their back catalogs for 50 million, 70 million, hundreds of millions of dollars. And so if you think that you're hearing a lot of that old music now, just wait, because those venture capitalists are buying that music, and they are gonna find ways that we can't even imagine for that music to show up anywhere and everywhere. And, I say, for the bands that sold it and make that money, well, that's great for you. But as a listener, as a consumer of music, it worries me, just how much am I going to be exposed to the songs sometimes I can't even escape now.
Mm. Yeah, I can't think of too many things less rock and roll than a TurboTax
No.
commercial.
No,
You take,
but,
like, your
if
punk
they
rock and
but but I think we have to conclude that if that wasn't having its dividends, they wouldn't be doing that. But
yeah,
you don't hear, the original jingles nearly as much. I mean, they just go with what works, and this is the same thing anytime you see a movie trailer for some big action movie, some superhero movie, it's always some song that you've been hearing your whole life. Oh, ELO, and
yeah,
opening the trailer. It used to always be Motown songs, and now it's just kinda '70s classic rock songs, because it's the same thing we're talking about. It's that instant response. And this is not just for the people who grew up on that music, because those people raised their children, because I certainly did, on the music. We were that generation for whom it was so important to expose our children to the music that we thought was great. My parents didn't do that. My parents didn't say, "Okay, I really want you to hear this Perry Como album," or "Here's this
mm,
Jim Neighbors album you gotta listen to." Like, they didn't really care about what music I listened to, so I made my own discoveries. But when I had children, you know, having them listen to the Beatles' Revolver album or the Yes album, that was as important as getting them vaccinated. Like, "This is hugely important time right now. We're gonna drive in the car, and we can talk a little bit, but we're also just gonna listen." And so that was important for me for my sons to just listen to music and absorb it. They didn't have to like it all, but I wanted to give them a foundation of what I thought was great music, just in the way that, you give your child a book that you think is great, or you show them a movie you think is great. Because I wanted them to go off and find their own music. But what my point is, so they know the music of their time, but they also know the music from my time, because I'm like so many millions of parents who kind of said, "All right, we want you to hear this music." So they know that music as well as their own, essentially. So that in some ways, that's a nice thing, but there may be some, I don't know if that's a curse exactly, but we have a much younger generation of listeners who are nostalgic for music that wasn't even part of their growing up.
Yeah. So much identity was wrapped up in the music you listen to. As I wonder if it's maybe only a couple generations really had this,
Yeah.
where I don't think it was really happening. I don't know. I wasn't in the 40s and the 50s, but when things like you were the Beatles or you were the Rolling Stones, and then you were like Led Zeppelin, or maybe
Mhm.
you were like Boston or
Yeah.
whatever it was, and then you were Nirvana or Pearl Jam, or you were hip hop, or
Yeah.
there was so much of that going on because we had this sort of like common cultural reference point
Mhm.
that we all watched the same things on TV. We all watched the same movies. We all had the same radio stations.
There
And
weren't
now we
endless
have,
choices. That's the
yeah,
thing, you know?
yeah, because now we can all go down our really idiosyncratic wormhole and get into my, all kinds of subgenres
Yeah.
that no one will ever know unless there's a few people on the other side of the world here and there scattered around that does make for a viable community. However, in our day-to-day lives, we don't have that. I see that a lot with my students in the high school.
Oh, I bet.
I used to be able to talk to them about the movies that were out or what was on television or the new artist, and now it's much harder to get those references to make points and connections to things because we don't share them as much anymore.
Well, they also just move on so incredibly
And they're
quickly.
fleeting, yeah.
I mean, when I was growing up, an album would come out, and if it was a, monumental album, then that album just felt like it never really went away, you know?
Mhm.
And it would stay on the charts for years, like Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon is the perfect example of that.
Mm.
We didn't just like, 3 months later, we weren't not listening to Dark Side of the Moon. Um, Now these, the albums will come, and they'll get written about so much in the early days and weeks, and then it just kind of within a few months, we've moved on to the next thing, and I think it's very hard in this century to know what the impact of the big albums is going to be 30 years, 40 years from now versus, what it was 50 years ago.
Mm.
Led Zeppelin 4 or Eagles, Hotel California. I mean, those continue to have such a cultural impact, in lots of ways, and that may be the case with music from this century, and I'm not comparing the music itself, I'm just saying this the albums come out, and they don't seem to linger now as much as they used to, but I think part of it is what you're saying, because there's just so many other things to vie for our attention musically, or musical, things and just other things.
Yep, it's an endless stream, literally, that you can just scroll right through. Yeah, things that if I catch on to anything that's current, half the time it's too old already, and it was
Right,
last month.
right, right.
Like they're like, "Oh, that's so old, dude. That was the fall."
Right, so but it doesn't mean it makes you wonder, then in 50 years from now, will the music that is around, the music that's being made now, or will it still be the music from the '80s and the '90s or '70s? If I
Mm,
had to bet, just to look and see how these back catalogs are selling, I think no, I think it's that music that's going to stand the test of time more. And thus,
yeah.
though, but therein lies a trap because there is a lot of great new music being made, but we have to want to listen to it or give it a try. You don't have to love it. You don't have to listen to it at length. If I get a new CD and I just know I don't like it, at some point I'm content to give up on it. But for me, it's important that I listened many times and I was open to
Mm.
it.
As somebody that's buying CDs and investing the time, how do you make the decision of what to choose to purchase or listen to next?
Well, I do read a lot about music. I mean, there's a lot of artists that I've read a lot about, but actually haven't gotten around to hearing. But I try. I mean, there's a lot of great music writing on the internet, and so I found my sites that I pay attention to and think about, and that's generally how it is. But and so in that way, it's not so different from when I was growing up because I was getting the music magazines,
Yeah.
Cream magazine or Rolling Stone, but also other magazines that didn't hold up as long, and there weren't that many of them, you know. Um, Guitar magazine, Modern Drummer, those. I mean, that was how I kind of stayed aware
Well,
of
we even
things.
had like zines that were very locally made
Right, right,
with
right. Very
yeah,
passionate
yeah,
pleas for this
handmade,
music.
photocopied.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so, I basically I read about music. Sometimes I catch interviews, you know, but that's how I like it. There are music writers that I think are really smart, and I'm interested to know what they think. And I'm always willing to give something a chance if but I do it more based on what I read. I don't go to Spotify and give it a listen. I just,
Mhm.
I would rather just, as you said, put down the money and make my investment, and hopefully it's worth it.
Yeah. Always has that risk, I guess. That was
But in the
the
scheme of
danger.
things, it's
Yeah.
not the greatest risk.
No, that's true. A funny thing that's happened to me over the last, I guess, like 15 years or so with new music discovery was it's a lot of it is all this behind the scenes stuff we see on social media. So it might be an artist picking apart the production, opening up their Pro Tools
Oh,
section,
yeah.
a
Yeah.
session, and like showing how they got the drum sound.
Right.
And
I do. I love those.
I might have arrived there because I want to know how to compress my snare drum properly. And I'm like, this is a cool song. Let me
Right,
check it out.
and it can make you appreciate the song that much more, right? We didn't have those
Mm,
kinds of things, when I was growing up. I mean, the internet can be its own trap, and the internet
yeah.
can make you stuck in the past. I wrote recently about how the internet just has these endless ranking the albums from Steely Dan or Traffic's albums, and it's everywhere. And I'm not saying there's not a place for the kind of reflection, or Rolling Stone, yet again another greatest guitarists of all time from Rolling Stone. So I'm not immune to some of that, but it is everywhere on the internet, and it just
Mm,
makes you. Or you can go on YouTube and you can watch whole concerts by Grand Funk Railroad, and on the one hand, if you're a big fan of Grand Funk Railroad, then great. But it is just one way to just stay stuck in the past. I think so much of the internet, whether it's like someone on Facebook who's dug up an old album cover and put it on, posted it. You remember this album? There's so much in the social media, so much on Facebook particularly, but there's so much in the internet that makes us like always looking back, always kind of there's always this implication. Well, those were better times. They were simpler times, and and that may be true. Some people can feel like that, but I'm just saying the internet seems to exist in part sometimes to just help us remember previous decades. Someone posted the
mm.
Macarena. Well, great, but I
There
don't
we
know if
go.
I need to think about the Macarena now,
Yeah.
2024, maybe I'll think about something a little more present.
Yeah. Well, those algorithms are trained to give you what you already like and what it
Yeah.
might think you will like or at least react to.
Well, there's a huge danger in that because it keeps you siloed. I mean,
Mm,
and it contains the kind of metadata that down to the instrumentation of a song. Well, if you like this song, there's another song that also had a violin, or also it's the same tempo or lyrical
mm,
content, pretty similar here, and it just keeps you in that place, and it doesn't want you to leave, you know? So that's, I mean, there's so much to say about all of that, but that's one of the dangers of streaming services like Spotify. You have to really work willfully to make discoveries. because if you just sit there and you let it kind of spoon feed you stuff, it can be great music, but it's gonna be all the same kind of music that you already know and that you're listening to.
Mm. It could really stagnate the culture in general.
Yes, yeah. I don't think that's overstating it at all. But it's
Yeah.
the thing is so weird is, um I mean, we have algorithms for all kinds of things, but like we're always consuming new TV shows. People get they'll
Mm.
go through a whole series that's on Netflix in a couple of days, or podcasts. People consume new podcasts, and they don't go to the movie theater as much as they used to. But people are interested in new movies. There's something about music, and I mean, this is part of what I'm exploring in the book. But it's different with music. We don't have the same impulses to keep being exposed to new things. We just get there's someone in the book who describes it as like a hard drive being filled, and that's how I thought of it for years. For some people, it is just a storage thing. It's just okay. I think that I have enough now, and it's
Mm.
weird though for me because it just doesn't extend itself to all the other art forms.
Mm. But I will say the last movie I saw was Beetlejuice.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And we had planned to watch Deadpool and Wolverine next, which are
Yeah,
all, these recurring things, franchises that have existed and
right.
been brought back over and over again.
Yeah, it new, but not new
F
exactly.
Familiar. Yeah.
Right. But you're
We know
still
we know what we're getting.
yeah, that's true, but it
Yeah.
is still a new product,
Yeah.
versus,
Right, I
like we're talking
gotcha.
about with
It's like the
music.
new album from Beetlejuice.
Yeah, yes. Right, right.
Right. Yeah, it's tricky. I I share a lot of your feelings. I I like that you are very clear too in the book about how this is your opinion and it's not right, it's not wrong, it's just your perspective. And if anyone's watching our interview right now, you can get a pretty good sense of who you are just looking at your background.
Huh.
You're obviously somebody that's interested in music, musical instruments, and I read that you're a collector of unusual instruments. And even
Yeah,
before we started recording, when I flipped this on, you were there playing, I think, a ukulele,
that's
maybe,
right. That's right.
just kind of waiting for it. So, you're somebody that cares about this stuff, clearly.
Well, I try, but, so I was being interviewed the other day, and someone said, "I wish your book had been angrier." And I I understood that because this guy had the same kind of rage about, like, we're stuck in the past. But music is supposed to be fun, and I don't
Mm,
have a judgment or I have opinions, but I don't judge people if they wanna listen to old music, but that's what I mean when I've written this book in part because I want to underscore that there are consequences to that, and some people can say, "Well, I don't care," and that's
yeah.
fine. So I don't have anger about the situation exactly, but I have concerns.
I do have this sort of running joke that I'm half serious about and half joking about, that maybe tribute bands should be illegal
Oh, good heavens.
for the sake of original music. Sometimes I'll be out and I'll be like, "Oh, we better give these guys a fine. This is Tom Petty."
But, the
Just
thing about that is the thing that I think is great about tribute bands and artists, in that way is so there are so the this Journey tribute band that I spent a week with, several of the members thought that their whole dream was to make it playing their own music, and I don't think
mm,
anyone has a dream to be in a tribute band. Tribute band is what you end up in because maybe things didn't go quite the way you wanted, but these guys that I'm thinking about that I spent all this time with, they're so thrilled to be making a living or making the money that they
mm,
do playing this music. If they hated that music, they wouldn't be playing it. Or the bassist said, and he was very reluctant to join the band, and now he's amazed that he still loves it. Man, but he
yeah,
does. And so tribute bands, I think there used to be this feeling that they were like in the very beginning. There used to be this feeling that they were kind of the bottom of the totem pole of musical entertainment, And clearly that's not how people see that anymore. And, but I think if you wanted to play music as a living and you are doing that and you're happy, even if it's not the music you had wanted, but if you are doing that and you're avoiding situations where HR says, well, we need to schedule your annual review, or here's the new software we all have to get trained on. There are a lot of
Playing
things.
guitar and Journey
Yes.
or Never Stop Believing is more appealing to
Right. Well, I'm just
any
saying,
meeting I can imagine.
right. I mean, it depends on who you are and what you want, but the
Yeah.
people that I spent time with in the tribute bands feel very glad to be in those situations.
Yeah, I know a lot of players that are in tribute bands or cover bands that have no interest in writing their own music
Yeah,
and just want to play the songs they love, and
right.
they have a lot of fun doing it. And I mean, I love it. I think it's great. I love to see people playing and having a good time. Um, it's um, it's a fun thing I like to say to stir up a little controversy with people. But there is a part of me that feels that maybe if we were a little less uh, into that, maybe we would have a little more new music. Because I do share your thoughts and your fear and the kind of ringing the alarm bell
Mm,
that I fear that we can be kind of just turning into our culture can really suffer from that
I
without
feel
any
like that.
innovation. And
Yeah,
not that I think it's cool to, you wouldn't expect an actor to write every movie they're in.
right, right.
Um, so to expect every musician to have to come up with everything is also kind of unfair too.
Yeah,
But it's an interesting thing you're bringing up, and I think the book Endless Refrain is really it's entertaining. It's got a nice sense of humor to it.
oh, good.
Uh, I think you probably made a good call not being too angry because I think it comes through a little bit and without turning people off to your overall message,
Yeah.
which is an important one to hear.
Well, I had fun writing it, and if I wrote a book that's not fun to read, then I made a fatal mistake. It
Right.
was fun talking to these musicians and these fans, and going to these shows and observing and just kind of wrestling with all these ideas, and it felt fun to be the one who would, as far as I can tell, to be the first one to kind of write a book, getting at all these issues within music. Um, so I'm glad that it went over well with you.
Yeah, I'm excited to finish the last part of it.
Good, good. Thank you.
So great. So David Rowell, The Endless Refrain. Anything else before we say goodbye to everybody?
Keep listening.
Keep listening. I like that. Thank you for listening to the Music Production Podcast. If you want to help support the show, the best thing you can do is tell a friend, someone you think that would enjoy the show. I'd also love it if you could leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to support my work, you can go to brianfunk.com. I've got tons of Ableton Live packs, tutorials, samples. You can check out my book, The 5-Minute Music Producer, which gives you 365 short music making activities to help you get started, stay inspired, and finish more music. And there's also the Music Production Club, where you get my latest releases as soon as they're finished. It gives you access to a community of like-minded people who are making music and sharing ideas. You can share your music, find new collaborators, and participate in our live meetings where we set up some kind of musical challenge and then make music together and share our results at the end. That's the Music Production Club. It's a lot of fun, and you can find that and everything that I do at brianfunk.com. Thanks again for listening to the show, and have a great day.